not sports competitions. These techniques were fast, direct, and devastating. And because they didn't follow the traditional format, they were never allowed in official matches. For example, Bruce practiced vertical punches aimed directly at the center line. Most fighters weren't ready for it. In Wing Chun, this is normal, but in tournament settings, it looked strange and often got flagged. Another move? The finger jab. He would strike at the eyes with laser precision. It wasn't illegal because it was dirty. It was illegal because it was too effective. He also trained for groin strikes, something no traditional martial artist openly taught at the time. Bruce believed that in a real fight, you aim where it hurts. Whether that was the eyes, throat, groin, or knees, Bruce didn't hold back. And then there was trapping. Bruce could close the distance, control your arms, and land 3 hits before you could blink. But in a point-based match, trapping was too fast to score. Judges didn't even see it, so it was pushed out of the spotlight. Why weren't these moves allowed? Because tournaments were designed to be safe, to protect fighters. Bruce's techniques weren't designed for safety. They were designed to end a fight before it even began. What made these techniques even more dangerous was Bruce's ability to mix them in combinations no one expected. A groin kick followed by a back fist. A finger jab followed by a sweep. He created chaos in milliseconds, and opponents couldn't process it in time. That's why Bruce stayed away from traditional tournaments. Not because he couldn't win, but because his game was far beyond the ring. He was preparing for real-world violence, where hesitation could mean death. These banned techniques weren't myths. They were real. They were practiced. And they were effective. But the world wasn't ready to see a man break all the rules and dominate without mercy. Now, after all these years, we're finally uncovering the truth. The hidden arsenal of Bruce Lee. The techniques too lethal for the ring, but perfect for the street. And this is just the beginning. When we think of Bruce Lee, we picture lightning-fast punches and devastating kicks. But there's one strike in his repertoire that was so powerful, so precise, that it could disable an opponent with just one move. And the best part, it was a move so forbidden, it was never taught in tournaments. This strike was none other than Bruce's 1-inch punch. Sounds simple, doesn't it? But when you understand the power behind it, you realize this wasn't just any punch. The 1-inch punch was a product of Bruce's mastery of minimal movement with maximum impact. At first glance, it looks almost impossible. How could a punch from such a short distance generate enough force to send someone flying? But Bruce Lee's body mechanics were flawless. He knew how to channel his energy, how to transfer it from his legs, through his torso, and into his fist, making that short, seemingly weak punch explosively powerful. The secret to the 1-inch punch wasn't just physical power. It was about timing and precision. When executed properly, the strike would land in the perfect spot on an opponent's body, using their own energy against them. Bruce's punch would strike right into the solar plexus or the chest, areas that, when hit correctly, would leave the person breathless and often incapable of defending themselves. But the real danger of this move was its ability to stun the opponent in a fraction of a second. It wasn't about knocking them out cold. It was about leaving them so disoriented, so breathless, that they couldn't react. It was an instant disabling move. The target might not even know what hit them before they were already off balance. In tournaments, such a move was seen as too effective and too dangerous. It was impossible to block and almost impossible to see coming. Even if an opponent tried to counter or dodge, the sheer speed and power of the 1-inch punch would break through their defense in a split second. Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch wasn't just about raw strength. It was about control, understanding the flow of energy and using it to your advantage. It's a perfect example of how Bruce redefined martial arts, blending science and philosophy to create techniques that defied the traditional limitations of combat. What made this punch even more terrifying was Bruce's ability to make it look effortless. When Bruce demonstrated it, there was no wild wind-up, no showmanship, just a subtle movement of his body and boom, his opponent was sent flying. It's the kind of move that would leave anyone in awe and disbelief. The 1-inch punch wasn't just a display of power. It was a reminder that in a real fight, it's not always about the big, dramatic moves. Sometimes, it's the smallest movements that carry the most deadly force. And this was just one of the forbidden strikes Bruce Lee perfected. In the world of martial arts, it was a game changer. But in tournaments, it was a strike that had to stay hidden because it wasn't just about winning, it was about survival. And Bruce Lee understood that better than anyone. When it comes to martial arts, power isn't always about size or strength. It's about knowing where to strike and how. Bruce Lee was a master of pressure point attacks, using them in ways that no one had ever seen before. These techniques weren't just for disabling an opponent. They were designed to bring them to their knees, often with just a single touch. Pressure points are spots on the body where nerves are concentrated and can be targeted to cause pain, paralysis, or even unconsciousness. The most famous martial arts, like acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine, have used pressure points for centuries. But Bruce Lee wasn't interested in the traditional, delicate methods. He wanted to use them in combat, and he wanted to make them devastatingly effective. Bruce's knowledge of the human body went far beyond what most martial artists knew at the time. While other fighters trained to land punches and kicks, Bruce trained his body and mind to understand how the body worked under pressure. He studied the human nervous system, learning which points could be attacked to immobilize or incapacitate an opponent instantly. One of his favorite pressure points was the temple. A sharp strike to this area could leave an opponent dizzy, disoriented, and vulnerable. Bruce's ability to strike with such precision meant that even if he was out of reach, he could still target these sensitive areas with remarkable speed and accuracy. But Bruce didn't stop there. He mastered attacks to the neck, the solar plexus, the carotid artery, and other vital areas. A strike to the right point on the neck could cause a sudden blackout, while a sharp jab to the solar plexus would take the wind out of anyone, leaving them gasping for air and unable to fight back. Bruce's pressure point strikes were lightning fast, and he trained to deliver them in combinations. One hit would lead into another, overwhelming the opponent before they even realized what was happening. He didn't just want to land a single blow. He wanted to control the fight from start to finish, and pressure points gave him that control. What made Bruce's mastery of pressure points so deadly was his ability to target them under stressful conditions. In real combat, the environment is chaotic. An opponent could be moving, striking, or defending. But Bruce's understanding of pressure points meant he could pinpoint them in any situation, even during a flurry of punches or while dodging an attack. Not only did he study the body, but he also adapted his training to fit his body's unique strengths. Unlike many martial artists who focus solely on strength, Bruce believed in using speed, agility, and precision. This approach made his pressure point attacks almost impossible to defend against. They were fast, direct, and almost always landed with devastating results. And this is why pressure point techniques were so banned from tournaments. They were too effective, too dangerous. When you understand how to disable your opponent with a single touch, the fight becomes less about skill and more about survival. And tournaments weren't designed for that kind of combat. Bruce Lee didn't just learn pressure points, he perfected them. His training was so precise that when he demonstrated his techniques, it wasn't about force. It was about knowing the exact spot to strike and the exact amount of pressure needed to neutralize an opponent. His mastery of pressure points is a testament to how deep Bruce's understanding of the human body and combat truly was. Now, imagine being on the receiving end of one of Bruce Lee's pressure point strikes. You wouldn't see it coming. You wouldn't know what hit you. And by the time you realized what had happened, it would be too late. In the world of martial arts, speed is often what separates the good from the great. But Bruce Lee wasn't just fast. He was a master at using blinding speed in ways that left opponents utterly defenseless. One of his most feared and lethal techniques was the deadly finger jab, a strike so fast, so precise, that it was virtually impossible to block or avoid. At first glance, the finger jab might seem like a simple move. After all, how dangerous could a jab from a finger really be? But in Bruce's hands, it became a weapon that could incapacitate an opponent with the smallest of movements. The key to the finger jab was its speed and precision. Bruce understood that the body's natural reaction to a fast-moving object is to try to block or dodge. But with his finger jab, he knew exactly where to strike to avoid defenses and make it nearly impossible for the opponent to react in time. He would aim for the eyes, the throat, or the soft tissue around the face, areas that, when hit by the finger jab, could leave the opponent disoriented or even unconscious. Bruce didn't use the finger jab in the way you might expect. While most martial artists would throw a punch or a strike with power, Bruce's jab relied on sharp, focused energy. He would use his fingers like a spear, driving them into the opponent's vital areas with laser accuracy. The speed of the jab was such that the opponent didn't even have time to react. By the time they saw it coming, the damage was already done. One of the most dangerous things about the finger jab was its invisibility. In a fight, Bruce's opponent would often be focused on his punches and kicks, unaware that his fingers were ready to strike at any given moment. The jab was a distraction. While the opponent was focusing on defending against the traditional attacks, the real threat would come from a quick, unguarded strike to the eyes or throat. The finger jab was not just about striking, it was about overwhelming the opponent with sudden precision. It was too fast to track, too accurate to block, and too dangerous to ignore. It was a technique that could cause instant damage, leaving the opponent in a state of confusion or pain before they even knew what had happened. In tournaments, this technique was a game changer. Traditional fighters were trained to block punches and kicks, but a fast-moving finger jab? That was something they couldn't prepare for. No matter how quick their reflexes were, Bruce's jab was quicker. And when it landed, it could leave the opponent blind, gasping for air, or unable to continue fighting. Bruce didn't just throw this jab casually. He practiced it until it became second nature. With his focus on directness and minimal movement, the jab would come from angles most fighters couldn't predict. Even if the opponent thought they could block or dodge, the jab would come at them from an unexpected angle, often hitting before they could even process what was happening. But what really made the finger jab so dangerous was Bruce's ability to mix it into his attacks seamlessly. He didn't just throw it on its own. He would combine it with other techniques, creating a fluid, unpredictable series of strikes that kept his opponent guessing. 1 minute, they'd be defending against a punch, and the next, they'd be hit with the finger jab, leaving them vulnerable to the next strike. The finger jab wasn't just a brutal move. It was an example of Bruce's ability to use economy of motion. Instead of winding up for a powerful punch, he'd use the smallest of movements to create maximum impact. And this is exactly what made Bruce Lee's fighting style so revolutionary. He could defeat an opponent not by strength, but by understanding how to use speed, precision, and timing to overwhelm them. Bruce Lee's finger jab remains one of the most feared and talked about techniques in martial arts history. It wasn't just a strike, it was a statement. A reminder that in combat, it's not always about strength. Sometimes, it's about being so fast and precise that your opponent never stood a chance. In any fight, the key to winning isn't just about landing the first punch or kick. It's about controlling the rhythm. The moment you break your opponent's rhythm, you break their ability to defend and counter. Bruce Lee was a master at this, and one of his most shocking techniques was his ability to interrupt an opponent's flow and force them into a position where they were always on the defensive. Bruce understood that the rhythm of a fight, whether it's a slow, measured exchange or a fast-paced brawl, was critical to success. Most fighters, when engaging, fall into a rhythm, throw a punch, block, counter, repeat. But Bruce didn't wait for his opponent to dictate the pace of the fight. Instead, he intercepted their attacks before they could even start, using their own movement against them. Bruce's intercepting techniques were lightning fast, and they were designed to disrupt the opponent's timing and confidence. He wouldn't wait for an opening. He'd create one by attacking the moment his opponent committed to their move. Imagine you're about to throw a punch, you're mid-motion, and just as your arm is extending toward your target, Bruce would intercept with a quick strike or block, stopping your momentum dead in its tracks. One of the most famous examples of Bruce's intercepting techniques was his straight lead punch. He would use his own lead hand not just to punch, but to deflect and counterattack in one fluid motion. The beauty of this technique was its efficiency. Bruce wouldn't waste any movement. The punch would land on the opponent's body, while simultaneously preventing them from following through with their own attack. Bruce also perfected the art of the parry-and strike. While most fighters focused on blocking or absorbing blows, Bruce's strategy was to redirect the opponent's attack in such a way that it created an opening for him to strike. For example, if an opponent threw a punch, Bruce would parry it with minimal movement and immediately retaliate with a hit to their exposed side or face. It was all about breaking the rhythm, confusing the opponent, and striking before they could even react. What made Bruce's intercepting techniques so deadly was his ability to anticipate his opponent's actions before they happened. It wasn't about waiting to react, it was about reacting before they even moved. He trained his reflexes to a level where he could sense the smallest shift in an opponent's stance or body language. As soon as the opponent committed to an attack, Bruce was already there, cutting off their movement and delivering a devastating counter. One of the reasons these techniques were so effective was because they neutralized an opponent's confidence. When you think you have the upper hand, when you feel the rhythm of the fight is in your control, it's mentally jarring to suddenly have that control taken away. Bruce's ability to intercept and counter would leave opponents feeling off balance and frustrated, unable to find a rhythm of their own. In tournaments, these techniques were not only difficult to defend against, they were difficult to even comprehend. Fighters would be focused on landing their own attacks, not realizing that Bruce wasn't simply blocking their moves. He was breaking their rhythm before they even got started. The moment the flow of a fight was disrupted, the opponent was already defeated. Bruce Lee's use of intercepting techniques wasn't just about the physical act of blocking or attacking. It was about dominating the mental game. By breaking his opponent's rhythm, Bruce would leave them in a constant state of confusion and vulnerability, where they never had the chance to get comfortable. The fight would always be on his terms, and his opponent would always be playing catch-up. And this is why Bruce Lee was so far ahead of his time. He didn't just learn to fight better. He learned to control the fight from start to finish. His intercepting techniques were a perfect blend of speed, timing, and psychological warfare. They were a testament to his genius and his ability to break down an opponent piece by piece. In the world of martial arts, the low kick is often underestimated. But when Bruce Lee utilized it, it became one of the most feared techniques in his arsenal. These weren't just regular low kicks. Bruce's low kicks were spine-shaking, devastatingly impactful strikes that could bring an opponent to the ground with a single hit. And because of their brutal effectiveness, they were banned from many tournaments. The low kick, especially when executed to the legs or knees, is a classic way to disable an opponent. But Bruce Lee didn't just throw random low kicks. He perfected a series of lightning-fast, calculated strikes aimed at vulnerable areas. His target? The knee joint, the lower leg, and the spine. Areas that, when struck with precision, could cause instant damage or long-term incapacitation. One of the most lethal low kicks Bruce used was the sidekick to the knee. The sidekick might look like a traditional technique, but Bruce's version was designed to strike with unbelievable force. A well-timed sidekick to the knee would not only disrupt the opponent's balance, it could potentially shatter their knee or force them into a defensive stance, leaving them unable to continue the fight. Bruce also mastered the low roundhouse kick, aimed at the thigh or calf. While this might sound like a regular leg kick, Bruce's kick was different. He used speed and precision to land it in the perfect spot, targeting the soft tissue or muscle groups that would render the opponent unable to move. The force was so intense that it could leave an opponent's leg unable to bear weight, making it difficult for them to stand or counterattack. But it wasn't just about the leg. Bruce's low kicks were designed to target the spine in a way that would leave an opponent's body completely compromised. With his quick, low roundhouse, Bruce would aim for the lower back or the tailbone, delivering a strike that could shake the spine to its core. This technique was especially effective in close-quarters combat. Bruce didn't need distance to land these strikes. With his ability to close the gap quickly, Bruce could deliver a low kick with devastating force before his opponent even realized what was happening. What made these low kicks even more dangerous was their blinding speed. Most fighters, even those skilled in traditional martial arts, focused on higher targets, headshots, body kicks, and punches. But Bruce understood that by attacking the lower limbs, he could effectively disable the opponent's mobility. And a fighter without mobility is a fighter without defense. These kicks weren't just powerful, they were precise and calculated. Bruce would never throw a kick just for the sake of it. Every strike was part of a larger plan to break down his opponent, piece by piece. Whether it was targeting the knee, the thigh, or the spine, every low kick Bruce threw had a purpose. The goal was never to just score a point. It was to dominate and neutralize. In tournaments, low kicks like these were banned because they were considered too dangerous. They could cripple an opponent, and in some cases, cause permanent damage. Fighters could recover from a punch or a regular kick, but a well-executed low kick to the knee or spine could leave an opponent unable to continue. This wasn't sport, it was survival. And in that sense, Bruce Lee's low kicks were too brutal for the tournament scene. Bruce's understanding of low kicks was rooted in his ability to read the opponent. He wasn't just attacking, they were part of a larger strategy. If he knew his opponent favored a certain stance or position, he would deliver the right low kick at the perfect moment, breaking their rhythm and forcing them to adjust. Bruce didn't just rely on his punches and kicks. He knew how to use every aspect of the fight to his advantage. These spine-shaking low kicks were a perfect example of Bruce Lee's revolutionary approach to martial arts. He didn't follow the traditional rules. He made his own, and the results spoke for themselves. His kicks weren't just powerful. They were calculated, precise, and designed to break down any opponent in the quickest way possible. And because of this, they became one of his most feared weapons. A weapon that was far too dangerous for the regulated environment of tournaments. Bruce Lee was known for his blistering speed, his unmatched power, and his devastating combinations. But one of the most lethal aspects of his fighting style wasn't any one strike. It was his ability to overwhelm opponents with combinations that left them no time to react, no time to defend. One of Bruce's most dangerous weapons was his secret combo, a series of rapid, unpredictable strikes that could break even the toughest fighter's defense in a matter of seconds. Unlike most martial artists, who relied on predictable patterns or big, telegraphed movements, Bruce's combinations were designed to be chaotic, fast, and impossible to counter. He didn't throw punches and kicks with the intention of landing just one blow. His goal was to flood his opponent with an unrelenting series of strikes, so fast and varied that there was no time to react. One of his most famous combos started with a feint, a fake move designed to throw the opponent off balance. He might throw a quick jab to the head, then suddenly change direction with a sidekick to the knee or an uppercut to the body. It wasn't just about landing the first hit. It was about forcing the opponent into a position where they had no choice but to defend against a barrage of strikes. Bruce's combos weren't just about speed, they were about precision. Every strike in his combo had a clear target, and each one was designed to set up the next. He'd follow a punch to the head with a kick to the ribs, then move in with a knee strike to the body. It was a fluid, seamless series of movements that left no room for the opponent to recover. There was never a break between strikes. It was a continuous, overwhelming offensive that forced his opponent onto the back foot. The beauty of Bruce's combo was its adaptability. He didn't rely on one set pattern. If his first few strikes didn't land, he was already adjusting for the next one. He was constantly reading his opponent, adjusting his attacks to exploit any weaknesses or openings. It was all about pressure. Bruce would apply relentless pressure with each movement, making it almost impossible for the opponent to defend or escape. Another crucial aspect of Bruce's combo was his ability to mix different angles and timing. He didn't just throw punches in a straight line. He would attack from unpredictable angles, a hook, then a straight punch, then a low kick, all in rapid succession. The unpredictability of his strikes was what made his combos so effective. Even experienced fighters would be overwhelmed by his speed, unable to track or defend against each attack. Bruce Lee's secret combo wasn't just about brute force. It was about breaking down the opponent mentally. Fighters are trained to recognize certain patterns and anticipate movements. But Bruce didn't give them that luxury. His combinations were designed to throw off their timing and force them into constant defense. The moment the opponent tried to react, Bruce would already be a step ahead, moving on to the next strike. For Bruce, every fight was a mental game. His combos weren't just about physical domination. They were designed to create a psychological advantage. By throwing rapid, unpredictable combinations, Bruce would disorient his opponent, causing them to make mistakes. When the opponent was overwhelmed with the sheer speed and volume of the attacks, they'd start second-guessing themselves, losing confidence and becoming more vulnerable to Bruce's final blow. The secret to Bruce's combination wasn't just about throwing a lot of strikes. It was about creating openings and using them before the opponent even realized they existed. Every punch, every kick, was designed to either land or set up the next move. Bruce didn't need to rely on one perfect strike. His combo was a continuous flow of movement, forcing the opponent into a defensive posture from which they couldn't escape. In tournaments, these kinds of combos were virtually impossible to defend against. While other fighters might focus on landing one or two powerful punches, Bruce Lee knew that the key to overwhelming an opponent was to never stop moving, to never give them a chance to breathe. His combos were relentless, and once he started, there was no way to recover. It wasn't just about winning, it was about breaking the spirit of the opponent, leaving them physically and mentally defeated. And this is exactly why Bruce Lee's secret combo became one of his most dangerous and feared techniques. It wasn't just about power, it was about speed, precision, and overwhelming pressure. For those who faced Bruce Lee in combat, it was a lesson in mental warfare and physical domination. When it comes to legendary techniques, few are as famous as Bruce Lee's one-inch punch. It's a move that defies logic. How could a punch thrown from just 1 inch away be so powerful? But for Bruce, it wasn't about strength or distance. It was about explosive power and perfect technique. And this punch wasn't just a parlor trick. It terrified even the most seasoned martial artists. The concept behind the 1-inch punch is simple, but the execution is what made it so extraordinary. Bruce would stand just inches away from his opponent, with his fist barely touching their body. Most martial artists would assume that a punch from such a short distance wouldn't have enough force to cause significant damage. But Bruce knew better. The power of his 1-inch punch came not from the length of the strike, but from the intensity of the movement and the efficiency of his body mechanics. What made the 1-inch punch so fearsome was its ability to deliver tremendous force with almost no wind-up. A traditional punch relies on the rotation of the body, the movement of the arm, and the momentum of the strike. But with the 1-inch punch, Bruce's body would generate maximum power in the shortest possible distance, without any need for a long wind-up. The punch would be delivered almost instantaneously, leaving the opponent with no time to react. Bruce's secret to the 1-inch punch lay in his understanding of kinetic energy. He knew that a punch wasn't just about how far the fist traveled. It was about how effectively the force was transmitted. Bruce's punches didn't rely on the arm alone. They were a combination of whole-body mechanics. By using his hips, legs, and torso, Bruce was able to generate an explosive burst of energy that traveled through his arm and into the opponent's body, despite the short distance. In his famous demonstrations, Bruce would push his opponent slightly off balance before throwing the punch. This slight disruption in their stance made it even harder for them to absorb the force of the strike. The punch itself was so fast and so focused that the target area would feel a sharp, concussive shock, even though the punch didn't travel far. The result? The opponent would often be sent flying backwards, stunned or disoriented. What made the 1-inch punch truly frightening to martial arts masters was its effectiveness in close combat. In traditional martial arts, close-range combat is usually seen as a place for grappling or less powerful strikes. But Bruce turned that assumption on its head. With the 1-inch punch, Bruce showed that even in close quarters, a punch could be as powerful, if not more so, than any long-range attack. This was a terrifying revelation for many martial artists. If a punch this small could generate so much force, what else was Bruce capable of? It wasn't just the punch itself that scared people. It was the realization that Bruce's skill could defy conventional wisdom. He wasn't relying on brute strength. He was relying on precision, timing, and the science of human movement to create an explosive effect. Bruce Lee didn't just practice the 1-inch punch, he perfected it. He spent hours working on the technique, ensuring that every muscle in his body was engaged to create the maximum amount of power in the smallest of movements. Unlike other martial artists, who focused on strength and distance, Bruce understood that true power came from the efficiency of the movement. He could deliver the same force in an inch that most fighters could only deliver in a foot. And that's what made Bruce's 1-inch punch so terrifying. It wasn't just a physical phenomenon. It was a mental shock for anyone who faced him. When Bruce delivered the punch, it felt like nothing they had ever experienced before. It wasn't just the impact. It was the realization that they were dealing with a fighter who understood the very nature of power and had the ability to execute it flawlessly. This technique, while famous, was also a perfect example of Bruce's philosophy of minimal movement for maximum impact. In a world where most martial artists focused on the bigger, louder strikes, Bruce was proving that you didn't need to swing wildly to deliver powerful blows. You only needed to know how to use your body to create the most efficient explosion of energy, and Bruce Lee had mastered that art. The 1-inch punch became a symbol of Bruce Lee's ability to push the boundaries of what was possible in martial arts. It wasn't just a move. It was a statement that he was on a level of his own, able to challenge the very laws of physics and conventional martial arts wisdom. Bruce Lee was a master of more than just physical combat. He was a master of mental warfare. Before he even threw a punch, Bruce was already in his opponent's head, controlling the mental aspect of the fight with precision. Martial arts is often thought of as a battle of physical strength and technique, but Bruce understood that mental control could make all the difference in the outcome of a fight. One of the key principles in Bruce Lee's fighting philosophy was dominating the mind of his opponent before ever landing a blow. He understood that a fight was as much about psychology as it was about physical skill. Before the fight even began, Bruce would engage in a subtle, yet effective game of mental chess, planting seeds of doubt, fear, and confusion in his opponent's mind. One of Bruce's favorite tactics was his ability to psych out his opponents with a simple look or movement. He would often remain calm and unpredictable, never giving away his intentions or emotions. This detached composure was a form of psychological manipulation. It made his opponents feel uneasy, unsure of what to expect next. Bruce's stillness, combined with his intense focus, would make opponents second-guess themselves. It's as if he was saying, "I'm in control and you're not." Another tactic Bruce often employed was his ability to provoke the opponent into making mistakes. He wouldn't engage directly right away. Instead, he would lead them into a false sense of confidence. By allowing them to attack first or take the initiative, Bruce was setting up a mental trap. He wanted them to believe they were in control, only to later shatter that illusion with a move they weren't prepared for. Bruce Lee's mental warfare wasn't just about trickery, it was also about reading his opponent. He could often tell what kind of fighter he was up against, based on their body language and facial expressions. He would study their movements, their hesitation, their confidence, and from that, he could predict what they were likely to do next. This was key in how Bruce would often react to attacks before they even happened. His ability to read opponents meant he could anticipate moves, counter before they launched, and control the rhythm of the fight. Another example of Bruce's mental tactics was his use of the feint and bait technique. He would intentionally leave openings or make a move that seemed vulnerable. The moment his opponent took the bait and attacked, Bruce would counter with swift, calculated precision, catching them off guard and throwing them off balance. This created confusion, and with that confusion, Bruce could control the flow of the fight, making his opponent hesitant and less confident with each move they made. Bruce Lee's mental tactics extended into how he prepared himself before the fight, too. He was known for his absolute confidence in his abilities. He never doubted his skill or strength, and that confidence was not just for his own benefit. It was a tool used to mentally dominate his opponents. When they saw Bruce Lee enter the arena, they saw a fighter who was completely focused, calm, and in control. This made them question their own mental state and ability to face him. One of the most intimidating aspects of Bruce's mental warfare was his ability to make his opponent feel trapped. Bruce was a master at cutting off escape routes, both physically and mentally. When he closed in on his opponent, there was nowhere to run, nowhere to escape. This physical trap was also a mental one. With nowhere to go, the opponent's thoughts would start to spiral and self-doubt would creep in, leading to hesitation and mistakes. In a fight, hesitation is deadly. Bruce knew that. And so, he would make sure to break his opponent's confidence at every turn. By making them second-guess their moves, Bruce would force them into a position where they were always reacting, never acting. This was the perfect setup for his physical attacks, and by the time Bruce did throw a punch, his opponent was already mentally defeated. Bruce's understanding of mental warfare was not just a product of his intelligence, it was a product of his experience and study. He studied the psychology of fighting just as much as he studied physical technique. He knew that in any fight, there was a battle for control of the mind, of emotions, of confidence. And Bruce's ability to dominate this mental battle made him even more dangerous than his physical abilities alone. His psychological tactics were just as deadly as his punches, kicks, and combos. Bruce Lee didn't just win fights with his body. He won them with his mind, always staying one step ahead and mastering the mental game before ever landing the first blow. Bruce Lee is regarded as one of the greatest martial artists of all time, not just for his physical abilities, but for his revolutionary approach to combat. But there's something that many people don't know. Some of the most lethal techniques Bruce developed were kept hidden, only revealed to a select few, or even kept secret entirely from the public. Why? Because these techniques were too dangerous, too powerful, and not suited for the traditional martial arts tournaments or the public eye. One of the main reasons Bruce Lee kept these moves hidden was because they were designed for real-life combat, not sport. Bruce didn't just fight for sport or for the glory of winning trophies. He trained to be the ultimate fighter for survival, someone who could neutralize an opponent in the quickest, most efficient way possible. His focus was on practical combat, moves that could end a fight with a single strike. And some of these moves were so effective that Bruce understood they had the potential to seriously injure or even kill an opponent. In tournament settings, where rules are in place to protect fighters and ensure the match remains within a certain level of safety, these lethal techniques were not just unnecessary, they were also illegal. Many of Bruce's moves were too brutal for the controlled environment of a competition. These techniques were meant to be used only in life-or-death situations, not in a controlled, regulated fight. Bruce Lee knew that unleashing these techniques in a tournament could cause irreversible damage, and that wasn't what he was training for. For Bruce, martial arts was about self-defense, control, and real-world survival, not just winning medals. Another reason these moves were kept hidden was because of the element of surprise. Bruce understood the importance of unpredictability in combat. If these techniques were widely known, opponents would have had the chance to prepare and defend against them. But by keeping these lethal moves secret, Bruce maintained a strategic advantage. When an opponent faced him, they had no idea what was coming. They would be caught off guard, unable to react fast enough to defend against such devastating attacks. Additionally, Bruce Lee was deeply concerned with the ethics of martial arts. He believed in using martial arts as a means of personal growth, not as a tool for violence or aggression. Many of the more dangerous techniques he developed were kept hidden because Bruce wanted to make sure they were used only when absolutely necessary, not for sport or to cause harm to those who didn't deserve it. He knew that teaching or demonstrating these moves to the wrong person could lead to their misuse. These techniques, when in the wrong hands, could be used recklessly and lead to serious consequences. In his private training, Bruce would experiment with these deadly moves, honing them until they were perfected. He had no intention of showing them to the public or using them in a tournament. The only people who witnessed the true extent of these moves were those who trained directly with him. And even then, Bruce was cautious about how much he revealed. He didn't want to become known as just a fighter. He wanted to be a philosopher of martial arts, someone who respected the art of combat and understood its potential dangers. Over time, as Bruce's fame grew and his teachings spread, some of his more hidden techniques began to leak out. But even then, they were rarely shown in full. Instead, only glimpses of his most lethal techniques were shared, often in private demonstrations or in specific combat situations. Bruce's personal philosophy played a huge role in this secrecy. He wasn't interested in showing off his abilities for the sake of ego or fame. He wanted to make sure that his art was used wisely, in a controlled, responsible manner. Now, as martial arts continues to evolve and as more of Bruce's teachings come to light, we are starting to see these once hidden techniques being shared with the world. But even then, they are still approached with caution, as they are not just physical movements. They are an embodiment of a philosophy, a mindset. These moves are not just about delivering strikes. They are about strategic thinking, mental discipline, and the ability to end a fight with as little movement as possible. Bruce Lee's secret techniques weren't just hidden because they were dangerous. They were hidden because they were meant to be understood in the right context. Bruce wanted to ensure that when these moves were revealed, they were used correctly with the respect and understanding they deserved. They were not just weapons. They were the culmination of a lifetime of training, experience, and deep reflection on what it truly meant to be a martial artist. Now, with these techniques being revealed, we get a glimpse into just how far Bruce Lee pushed the boundaries of combat. He didn't just master the basics. He created a new era in martial arts, one where speed, efficiency, and power were the key to success. The moves he kept hidden weren't just brutal. They were a reflection of his genius and his unrelenting pursuit of perfection. And now, for the first time, we get to see just how dangerous and effective Bruce Lee's secret techniques truly were.